just kind of reminiscing before we started the show about our days when he was in the state legislature, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we have with us today Mike Harmon. Mike is currently the state auditor of public accounts. I guess that's what they still call it. Anyways, we
It is
shorten it to say
auditor.
state auditor.
Yeah.
And he is finishing up his second and final term. He is term limited in that position. Right now, he is the auditor, but and has been for the last 7.5 years. But he has chosen to continue his um, desire for public service and is a Republican candidate for governor in this upcoming May primary. Mike, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Roger. I know we said we weren't going to mention our age, and I won't mention yours, but I'm the oldest currently serving constitutional officer statewide in Kentucky by 10 years now. At
By 10 years.
By 10 years. I'm 56. The closest to me is Secretary Michael Adams. He's 10 years younger than me. And then everybody else, the governor, current governor, everybody else is younger. I think our AG is like still in his 30s, like 37, 38, something like that. So
yeah. Well, that kind of cuts two ways. I'm getting a little gray hair, and I'm 55. I'm a year younger than you are. I mean, so but the I guess with age comes wisdom. It may
there
be,
you go.
but that it bodes well for the future that we have good candidates. I guess in the bullpen and on the field for the Republican Party. But let's just dive right into it. I mean, you don't need a lot of introduction. I think a lot of people know you. You served for 13 years, I think, in
That
the
is
state
correct.
legislature,
I did.
and then you're finishing up, as I said, your second term as state auditor, and so you're term limited in that. And so you have decided to, I guess, throw your hat in the ring and run for governor, which I admire anybody that decides to run for public office. So let's start there. Why are you running to be the next governor of Kentucky?
Sure. Well, after serving, as I said, 7.5 years as auditor and getting ready to term out, I prayed about my next direction. I had some people encourage me to run for treasurer. They said it would be a done deal, and you could. Some people portray it as staying on the gravy train, but I never ran for office for a salary. I ran for office because I prayed about it and I felt like God had leading me. But to be honest with you, I'm a Christian, and I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I'm a grandfather. And I want my kids and my grandkids, and if I'm lucky enough, my great grandkids, to live in a state where they can accomplish anything. And I mean anything. But, our current governor has put such a focus of fear over freedom instead of freedom over fear. I mean, think about it. He focused on fear over freedom when he shut down people's businesses. He focused on fear over freedom when, after he shut down their businesses, he shut down the in-person unemployment offices so people couldn't even get their unemployment. And finally, he focused on fear over freedom when he shut down our churches and he sent the state police out to try to enforce it. So we need a governor that's going to focus on freedom over fear instead of fear over freedom. And, of everybody that's in, really, we joke about it, but I'm not the oldest anymore, but I'm just about the oldest. I'm definitely the most experienced with 13 years in the House and 7+ years as auditor now. And I jokingly told one old boy down in the West that, of everybody in, back then I was the oldest. I'm the oldest. I am the most experienced, and I'm the funniest. And he said, well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So, yeah.
Well, there's a Meatloaf song in there somewhere. I think
exactly.
2 out of 3.
Exactly.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. You touch on the fact that you pray about the endeavor. You could have ran for treasurer, and of course we all hear about the musical chairs of Frankfurt for down ballot offices. That's went on for years, right? I mean, it's nothing new. But you say the Lord led you to run for governor, and I guess that I'm looking at your bio here. You describe yourself as a Christian conservative. Christian being the first thing.
Exactly.
In that, so yeah, so prayer, I think, in this day and age, it seems that people mock that type of thing, and that you pray about something.
But you know,
So
Roger, it's been starting that way even when I first started. When I first started, I kid you not, I had someone come up to me when I was running for state rep before I won, and they asked me, they said, "Now, once you get up there, can you set your faith aside and just, legislate?" And I looked at him, I said, "Man, if I can set my faith aside, I don't have any faith." So,
I've
faith
never
scares me.
really, yeah, I've never really understood that,
Yeah.
in the fact that they expect devout Christians to set their faith aside. I don't even know what that means. How can you segment an entire part of your personal philosophy
Well, our
and
founders
put it on a
certainly
shelf?
didn't. Our founders didn't set aside their faith.
No, the country is founded on Christian principles, on
Yeah.
on the Ten Commandments and all that. I mean, it's all grounded in Judeo-Christian values. For anybody that cares to really look at the founding documents, you can see that narrative all through our country's founding. So, but that's the
Exactly.
day and age that we live in. I guess is they try to relegate Christians to the sidelines, and that's one way that they do it, is that they push this idea that you must somehow put your faith on a shelf
Exactly.
in your decision making, and it's really hard to do that, right?
Yes.
Um, so never in my lifetime, but that I can ever recall, not even uh, when the Democrats held strong dominance in the state politically, that we have 12 people, I think 12, if I'm
Mhm.
counting
12
right,
Republicans.
12 Republicans seeking the office of for governor. And that's just for governor. That's not
Yeah.
12 total. That's just for the single office of governor. And I think Governor Bashir has a couple of folks maybe filed against him. For what that's worth, but that's a pretty crowded field. What, I guess, Mike, separates you from the other 12 Republicans running in this race?
Well, as was mentioned, I've got 13 years in the House and 7.5 years over in the uh, as auditor. But I tell everybody, all you got to do is go back and look at my voting record. Really, most of the other candidates don't have a voting record. Now, Ryan Quarles was in there for 5 years, but most of the other don't have a voting record. I had 13 years worth of voting records. And if you look at my voting record, I was always rated either the highest conservative or very close to the highest. Roger, we talk a lot about lately about these vaccine mandates, but a lot of people forget this is not the first vaccine mandate thing that we challenged. There was a push primarily from Democrats, but sadly there were some Republicans as well to try to create a mandate to require young ladies to have the HPV virus vaccine before they want them to go to school, public or private. And thankfully, myself and other Republicans like me stood up. We fought against a lot of people, and we were able to get that stopped. A lot of people forget that there was an attempt, you know, we were talking about banning cloning, and we should ban cloning, but there was a caveat to that. There was a lot of people pushed by the universities, and sadly, even some in our Republican leadership were falling prey to it, wanted to allow therapeutic, what they call therapeutic cloning. But people like myself and other Republicans, thankfully, we pushed back and we were able to stop that. So it's not uncommon, for me to fight for your conservative values. And like I tell everybody,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a polished politician, I'm probably not your guy. But if you're looking for someone that loves the Lord and loves his family and loves this country and in that order, well, I hope you'll think of me. And if you're looking for someone that's fought for your freedoms, your liberties, your conservative values, really, my entire life, but politically, definitely 20 plus years. Well, I hope you'll think of me, and I've had the experience to be able to go in there and get it done.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on this the cloning issue. Uh, that brings something to mind for me, and my wife and I were talking about it earlier. There is this uh, kind of rapid growth and expansion of uh, artificial intelligence. I don't
Right,
fully
right.
under, I don't fully understand what that means, but apparently you can just query questions or make what whatever. But we're facing a situation where with artificial intelligence, it, it's kind of like the cloning thing. Maybe just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. I mean, because they're running into questions about in academics. She
Sure.
teaches. She's a teaches some college courses in addition to her private practice, but uh, they're concerned about the artificial intelligence and students basically generating research papers. They're not really doing their own research. They're going to one of these AI uh, sites
Right.
or software and basically just typing in, "I need a paper," on this topic,
Right.
and
Right.
it's generating. It's basically generating paper that and um, that's just a real simple example, but I know, there's this whole push for these neuro implants for this to augment our memory and our thinking and all that. I don't know, those things all kind of fall in the realm of cloning in my thought process, and I don't know that it's. I think there's some benefit, but I think there's maybe some real pitfalls that we could fall into, and the science is kind of outpacing the policy in things.
All I know is that Siri doesn't get me, and I had one of my friends. I've got in my phone that if I say, call my wife, that it calls my wife. Well, I ended up keying in one of my friends' information, and I put in there, and I had his wife's number too. He wanted me to have in case we needed to reach. We were doing some stuff together as couples, so I had in there, his wife. Well, it got to the point to where if I asked Siri to call my wife, it was actually calling his wife. And so I actually had to change it in the system. So they're not quite as intelligent yet as we
Well,
think they might be.
they're
So
actually not, and I think it's. I guess if you're lucky enough to be elected governor, I think this is a public policy, at some level that the governor, next governor, is probably going to have to address. I mean, is how do we respond to this? Kind of in the same way that when you were in the legislature tackling the cloning issue of what's the framework in that. So that's just a passing thought that I had in that, but yeah, so 12 candidates. Back to our question. Uh, I think
sure.
you've reasonably answered that. Uh, and I think this fall going in, I think the COVID mandates will be a
Mhm.
top question or issue in the upcoming and how that's all been handled. I would agree with you. I lean more towards the freedom uh,
Mhm.
versus fear. I didn't care for much of the mandates at all. I'm kind of a small government guy, and but how I guess in your thought process, if you're the next governor, what's I guess what are the first two or three things as far as those mandates? How are you going to chart us in a different direction? I guess away from
Well,
the current policies that are still there.
thankfully, our current Kentucky General Assembly has done a pretty good job of reining in a lot of the power of the governor in that aspect. Obviously, there's still some. The governor, through lawsuits or whatever, has tried to seize part of that back. But it's like anything else. We should, whenever we are trying to make a decision, we should always err on the side of freedom as opposed to the side of oppression or mandates in that regards. And certainly we can go in and we can do a lot of assessments. And it's not just the mandates we're talking about, it's also regulations. One of the great things that Governor Bevin did in his administration was they went in and they cut a lot of regulations. The more regulations, because regulations impede freedom. Don't get me wrong; some regulations are needed. I mean, we need clean drinking water. But from the standpoint, we've got to find that balance because one of the things that I found out in traveling, especially in regards to regulations and freedom and development. When I went to the East, Roger, I mean, I had people tell me that the East was forgotten. And when I traveled to the West, I had people in the West tell me that they were forgotten. So one of the things we've got to do is we've got a great state, we've got a diverse state, we've got wonderful individuals, but we've got to make sure that we work with every part of our state. I understand the importance of the Golden Triangle, but at the same time, we can't forget any aspect of our state.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge uh, economic development issue.
Sure.
Being from Eastern Kentucky, I kind of maybe share a little different perspective, and I have grown up with just what you said, with the idea that a lot of times they forget about this, but in Frankfurt they forget about us, um, just like they forget about us in Washington sometimes as a whole
Yeah.
state. But I
Right.
think economically that we're kind of at an imbalance in that. And so I guess what I'm hearing from you is you have a plan, or you at least have an idea of how we bring the state together, both east and west, along with the triangle of Louisville, Lexington, Northern Kentucky, um, because that imbalance begins to impact us in unforeseen ways. So, I guess how would you unite us as a state?
Sure. Well, part of it is that, we've got to look at business. Of course, government doesn't create business. Government creates an environment of business, and we've got to
Yeah,
create an environment and including, potentially some incentives to make sure that there are businesses springing up across the state. And I understand some of these bigger businesses; those are great, like some of these battery plants. I'm excited, and of course, unfortunately, the governor probably took, more, if not all, credit for those, when in reality, those were developed because the Republican General Assembly put good, items in place that allows for business development in that regards. But, when those big businesses fold, and they do, it may not be, 30, 40, or 50 years, but when they fold, it creates a vacuum. So we're better off, in addition to that, creating smaller businesses throughout the state, 50 or 100 jobs in every community, where people, will have to drive just a short period to actually get there. The other, the other thing that we can do is, there's a lot of concern, whether it's the East or the West or the others. We've got a lot of people that are not necessarily working and may be on benefits, but a lot of them, they're not wanting to get out. They want to get off government benefits, but they feel trapped. And so we've got to work. And I know the Republicans in the House and the Senate, they've got a task force they're working on to try to help develop off ramps. And as governor, certainly I would like to be involved in those conversations to help people find a pathway where they can take an off ramp instead of a cliff to move away, from all the. I forget the last statistic. I think we've got 1.7 million Kentuckians on Medicaid.
yeah.
And that's a tough burden to carry for a period of time. But some of these people, if they make $1 too much, they lose thousands of dollars of Medicaid benefits. So we've got to find something to help resolve that issue.
Yeah, I mean the system now works against people that most likely would like to get off government assistance, but
Right.
it works against them. It works to
Sure.
keep them dependent on the government.
Yeah.
Uh, and
I
they,
mean, if you're worried about your child, if you're worried about your child getting food or getting, health care, especially, you're going to do everything you can to make sure your child's taken care of. I mean, I would fight for my children left and right, and with my grandchildren, I'll fight even more. But, so I mean, you're going to fight hard for them. So you're not going to do anything that's going to risk, losing those benefits for your kids, probably more so than you'd worry about yourself.
oh yeah, and the solution is not found in rhetoric that says, oh, well, if you elect this guy, you're going to lose your benefits. That's the classic liberal attack against any discussion of reform. Is what they're really saying is they want to take your benefits away from you. Well, No, because I'm in a really impoverished area here in eastern
Okay.
Kentucky, in Pikeville and Pike County, and I can tell you, uh, most of these people would work if given the opportunity, uh, but they do live in fear of, especially for their children, losing
Sure.
their health benefits mainly and their food support, uh, EBT food stamps,
Sure. Well, I mean,
and
it could be, yeah, it could be something as simple, and of course you'd have to get a waiver for it, but just something as simple of having people pay a percentage of their salary above poverty. So take whatever money you make minus poverty times whatever that percentage,
yeah,
make it a percentage so that it's not encumbersome, but at the same time, that percentage eventually gets to the point where it makes more sense to go into the private market as opposed to staying on Medicaid. And if you did that, that way you could ease your way. Now, there's going to be some people, I talked to one guy who's he actually lobbies now up in Frankfurt, but he had a hard time getting off Medicaid. He may still be on it because he really required it because I think he was paralyzed from the waist down, and so he needed those benefits to continue. So some people may want to stay on it, and make a whole lot above and beyond. But if they have that incentive and they can actually participate in their work, in other words, enjoy the fruits of their labor without losing all the other, or at least not all of them, then we're all going to be better off.
yeah. I mean, they're productive, they're taxpayers,
Sure.
and contributing to the system. And I think that our current system definitely needs reform in some way. But finding a solution that protects those that are greatest at risk of losing benefits,
Sure.
that's the transition that we have to look at is how we do that. Okay, let's talk a little education. Uh,
Sure.
there's always there Governor Bevin. There was the whole thing that dominated the race 4 years ago in discussing education, and maybe it was handled not the best, but how would you um, what are the issues, I guess, surrounding education? And that's always a hot topic. What are some of the things that you're
Sure.
looking at in terms of your candidacy in education, and how would you approach reform and in that public policy
Sure,
realm?
sure. Well, first of all, I have no goal or intention of demonizing our current teachers. I know they
Yeah,
work very diligently, and I will tell you, I'm a product of traditional public education, including not only K through 12, but also college. I went to Eastern Kentucky University, graduated triple major, math, statistics, and theater. I joke and tell everybody that way I know the math, I know the statistics, but I don't know. I just act like I know. So, but that's just a little joke. But from the standpoint, but I will say that I feel like that we've got off focus. The child should be at the top of that educational pyramid. We've got to get back to the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic. We've got to get back to empowering our parents. My sister-in-law, she's retired now, but she had taught in public schools. My mom, actually, my mom went back to college when my older brother and I were in college. So she got her degree when she was like in her 40s and taught in private Christian education. And my wife and I, our kids, we've had them in public education, homeschool for a little bit, and private Christian education. And to be honest with you, Roger, there are strengths and weaknesses in all of them. But we need to empower the parents to be in control of their child's destiny, because even in some of what we would consider the best schools in the state, that may not be the fit for that particular child. And thing that concerned me, years and years ago, I was talking with a local KEA president. She was very nice. She was actually a Republican, to be honest with you. And she was talking with me because I always interview with KEA. I think it's important for them to know where we stand. And she was like, Mike, we appreciate what all you do for teachers, but we just don't understand why, you support school choice, which is a part of parental empowerment. It's not all of it. And I explained to her, I'm a stats guy and I've seen the stats. And if, parents choose public school, if they have an option, but they go ahead and choose public school, their satisfaction level skyrockets. And she looked me right in the eye and eyes, and she said, uh, Mike, if you let parents choose, they would never choose their school. And to be honest with you, I knew she was wrong. I mean, what she was telling me was wrong. I knew the teachers in that school. It was a public school. I knew the teachers. They had worked their butt off to get that school system back up. I knew the parents that had worked with those teachers to get that school system back up. But the fact that a teacher in the school system thought that they were putting out subpar product, that broke my heart. For the teachers in the system that had worked their butt off, it broke my heart for the parents, but most importantly, it broke my heart for the kids. Because whatever we want to say about the education system, whatever we want to say, like I said, I love our teachers. Whatever we want to say about our teachers, the whole system is not about employing people, it's about educating our kids. And that's where we have to put them back at the top of that educational pyramid. So we've got a lot of good schools. We've got some schools we have some concern with, but we've got to get our children back at the top of that educational pyramid.
Yeah, my dad taught school for almost 30 years. He retired
Yeah,
from the public school system here in Pike County. I'm a product of the public school system in Pike County. I went to college at the University of Kentucky, but I graduated from Pikeville College, University of Pikeville here. But I've seen education through the years, and saw growing up the concerns as an educator that my dad had, and I saw more and more bureaucracy, and this was always
yeah,
his complaint of the
sure.
bureaucracy and the paperwork was stifling the ability of the classroom teacher to educate, that they had so
That's
much
exactly.
responsibility that it basically dilutes the education of the student. Um, but it seems that, I'm all about choice, I'm all about free market competition, but it seems that only in education do we want to stifle or restrict competition. I think competition is a good thing no matter what it is.
It is.
Right? And that's what choice is really about, is about being competitive, and that makes you better,
It does.
if you're competitive in most cases, right? So why should education be any different?
And every child should be encouraged to exceed and excel to their highest level, not to the lowest average or anything. They should every child's unique. God made children unique and different, but every child should be encouraged to excel to their greatest level and their greatest potential. And whoever can help them accomplish that, that we need to let them to be able to do that. And people shouldn't have that concern, based on their zip code or their financial capabilities. Every child should be able to excel and no child should be allowed to not be able to, we want them to exceed to their greatest level possible. We can't let children fall through the cracks, but we also
Yeah.
can't, like, as I said, set just some one average or slightly below average mediocre bar and force everybody to that one level, because everybody's different. Everybody has unique talents.
Well, I'm seeing that, just from what I see and observing the educational system now, is it seems that, we work to get those from the bottom to the average, and we drag the more excellent excelling student, uh, down to the average. That's not how it should work. I mean, all of them should be given
Mhm.
opportunities, I think, but I think the only thing that solves this is more competition. I know
It
that's
is.
probably not a popular opinion, but I
Well,
think choice, and there's the issue of charter schools and all that, and that's not going to go away as a policy issue, in my opinion. I think it's going to continue.
Well,
Uh,
and one of the things we faced in Kentucky, of course, we, like some states, have what's known as the Blaine Amendment codified into our Constitution, which really the Supreme Court has, on the federal level, has found anytime those Blaine Amendments been challenged to be found unconstitutional. Unfortunately, it started a lot of anti-religious basis when they were going around, early on in the formation of the Constitution, when he couldn't get it on the federal level, they fought to get it in some states. Sadly, that's codified in our Kentucky Constitution, but we will have to work to get those overturned in that regards. And there's some other things that they look at, but that's primarily what it is. So we will have to continue to fight, and you'll be knocked back a little bit. But I think the other thing is, if you've got a General Assembly and a governor working together, if my background, and I know most of them there. Now, I can't say I've served with all of them there because there's such a turnover since even I left, but I've served with several of them that are still there and several of them that are in leadership. So working together, I think we can make sure that the education of kids excel to the level, but we need to keep in mind that we shouldn't demonize any aspect of our education. We shouldn't demonize our current public educators. We shouldn't demonize private schools. We shouldn't demonize our homeschoolers, our parochial schools. We need to all work in tandem for the betterment of our children.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's shift gears, talk a little bit about tax reform.
Sure.
I think we're on the correct path.
I agree.
Phasing out income tax in the state of Kentucky. My only gripe is it's not coming quicker.
Well,
But as a Governor Harmon, what's your position on that issue right now?
Sure. Well, I'm definitely in favor of the position that the General Assembly under Republican leadership has been taking this over the last couple of years, with the goal of eventually eliminating the income tax completely. I remember when we were in there, the top rate was 6% for the state tax. I think it's now 4%, if I remember correctly. And so, that's the right direction. But they've also put in those thresholds instead of just pulling the trigger like Kansas did. Kansas pulled the trigger and it didn't quite work out right. And they had to put a lot of the stuff back. So the incremental, very methodical to get us there. Now, if we had been there, 20 plus years ago, we'd be all right because we'd be there now. But just to kind of pull that switch. But for us, if we're going to be competitive with states like Tennessee and Texas and Florida, and some of the other ones that do not have income tax, and we want to incentivize people to work, by letting people who work keep more of their income, we should have more people working. So, I mean, I think it's a great path that they're taking, and I look forward to when we can get it down to zero and be truly competitive.
Forward to that day, I think Tennessee, obviously, we hope we're not far from Tennessee. There's lots of people here that buy property in Tennessee simply to establish residency there so they can license their vehicles in the state of Tennessee.
Right.
The big gripe I've always had is that we just pay absolutely too much ad valorem tax on retagging vehicles every year. It's a very discouraging thing when people can go to Tennessee for a few dollars and tag their vehicle or their boat or their RV or whatever that is, and it's far cheaper in Tennessee
Right.
than it is here. So I think that's something that the legislature needs to definitely consider as they reform taxes, is looking at repeal of the ad valorem motor vehicle tax. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I agree.
yeah. So I guess in that reform, how do you see this, say we're 15, 20 years down the road, how do you see this in terms of revenue for local governments? Do you see a model similar to Tennessee's where the local governments are going to be more flexible in the sales tax or being able to add taxes to whatever the state sales tax or whatever those package of taxes
Yeah,
are?
I mean, right now there's a lot of limitations on what local government can assess. I mean, obviously they can assess a hotel tax, and there's some other, restaurant taxes, depending on the, what level of city that they are designated as. Some of them can, some of them can't. That's primarily more for economic development than it is for, the operations of government. There have been some attempts over the last couple of years to pass a constitutional amendment that would allow them to be able to do something to that effect. I think some of the earlier attempts were fairly limited and would eventually take the General Assembly out of it completely. I think most recent, as I understand, attempts has not been passed and put on the ballot as of yet, but should it pass, the most recent attempts basically would allow it, but would leave it in the hands of the General Assembly to make the determination and set the parameters for the states. And if you're going to do it, that's probably the best direction to do it, because that way you can hold, the legislators accountable if you don't like the path, or the governor accountable if you don't like the path that he is or she has supported. So it's one of those things. I'm a little torn. I'm always one of those that, if you're going to go with the sales tax, then let's eliminate the occupational tax. And that includes, if you're going to do it locally, if you're going to, add the sales tax, well, then do that as eliminate or have a blend of the both. But the goal would be eventually to eliminate the occupational tax everywhere. So, if you can delegate them to choose between the sales tax or the occupational tax locally, then it might be something that would be beneficial.
Yeah, well, that's that. I think you and I are on the same wavelength there about that. I mean, I think you obviously have to give local governments more flexibility, because at here we just a few years ago in Pike County, and they passed the business and net profits tax, occupational tax as we call it. That was highly controversial. The whole entire court got swept out of office at the next
Right.
election. Uh, they'll never, I mean, it happens. But
Yes.
our coal severance tax, the severance tax on extracted mineral, uh, obviously collapsed, and the
Correct.
local government had little to no revenue. It's still feeling the effects of that. Uh, but now what we're seeing in the county here, there's a few communities that are saying we want to incorporate and make ourselves incorporated cities or towns, and concentrate that occupational tax in that smaller area. Pretty smart, actually. But even at that, I don't think the B&O tax is the best tax. I think sales tax is probably the best way to go on any of this, right? If you consume and buy, then you're paying the tax.
Right.
Um, so
And
it's a
you
process.
choose to.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process. Um, in terms of rural, let's talk a little bit about rural economics. We're just
Sure.
about out of time, but uh, obviously Pike County, Eastern Kentucky here, and parts of Western Kentucky, coal mining and natural gas and oil, the fossil fuels industries have been uh, the lifeblood of communities for
Sure.
over a century. Um, we have highs and lows in that. I mean, as governor, kind of what is your thoughts on the current state of those industries, and how can we make those industries and encourage other industries, uh, renewable and alternative energies, to thrive in Kentucky to create jobs?
Sure, sure. Well, certainly we still have an abundance of natural resources in Kentucky, not only coal, but natural gas and other items, and certainly we need to work on that. We also need to be strong in our defense of those, whether that's using the 10th Amendment to defend them, whether it's one of the things that I've worked on as auditor and Treasurer Ball. As well, both of us are members of a group called SFOF, State Financial Officers Foundations, and we have looked heavily into the concerns over the ESG, the environmental social governance movement, which in some cases is taking our pension dollars or people's investment dollars, and either without our knowledge or without our authority is taking them, and instead of acting in a fiduciary manner to try to get the most profit, they are investing in items to advance their agenda. In some cases, they're even taking our proxy votes from the monies for the pension funds and using those to leverage getting things that are not in our favor, as well as to take over boards. So we have to be vigilant and mindful. And I've talked to, several members. I'm a member of the Public Pension Oversight Board, and have talked to, those while I was on the board and also outside. And some of them have pulled me aside and thanked me for the proactiveness of it, because some of them have concerns, but perhaps they weren't monitoring, especially the proxy votes, as closely as they should. So,
as they should have. Yeah. And
yeah,
people need to be more in tune and understand this, the ESG, as I call it. And you're
yeah,
seeing this
yeah,
pop up. Corporate, big corporations, it's kind of a buzzword for them right now, right? I mean, it's we're adhering to ESG standards, and that kind of thing. And I just don't know uh, if that's the best path forward for us in
Well,
that.
here's the thing. Here's the thing, Roger. If you want to take your personal money and invest in companies that their focus is ESG, more power to you. If
Yeah,
if I want to, well, more power to me. But when it comes to our pension funds, we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that investments produce as much money as possible. Because guess what? Our one of our pension funds is only funded at 18%. Who covers the difference? The taxpayers. The
yeah,
taxpayers cover when those fall short. So they should have a fiduciary responsibility to invest our money. And plus, we shouldn't be having investments in such a way that is contradicting, our state and the advancement of our state. Especially, you mentioned fossil fuels. We shouldn't be investing. Of course, we passed legislation to create a list of banks and things along that lines, investment companies that are, doing things to try to shut down the fossil fuel. And Treasurer Ball actually released a copy of the list that she determined fit that just recently. So that's something you can go check on as well. But it's one of those things that, we just have to continue to be vigilant to make sure our money is not being used against us. Our money, our values.
that's it. I mean, so if an investment goes bad with a public pension, we're on the hook for it, right? Our tax money's on the hook to
The
fix that
taxpayer
deficit.
dollars, the
Yeah,
way that the way that the laws were written. I mean, I've had a lot of people, contact me that are frustrated because, and they may have had a 401k or a pension plan that in the private sector that folded, and here they are. No one's, maybe they're holding them accountable wise, but not really. People, they're not made whole for the loss of those pensions, but yet, the taxpayers are, on the hook for the portion. Now, I don't hold the pension, the people that are receiving pensions, I don't hold them accountable at all. They were made a promise. They worked for however many years they worked to get that promise. But for the people that structured it initially, the people that made changes, the people that made it richer along the way, and the people that didn't fund it along the way, well, they have put the taxpayers as a whole on the hook on something that really a lot of people think you can get out, but you really can't get out of it. There's certain aspects of it that are not part of the viable contract or in viable contract, but most of it is. So it's one of those things to work to get it whole. I mean, I would not be opposed to doing an actuarial analysis and offering a optional buyout of 60 or 65 cents on the dollar of the actuarial value of it. But I don't know how many people would take it, because they know that the taxpayers are on the hook for all of it either way. So unless
yeah,
they just thought it was going to fold, which the
yeah.
state would have to fold probably for it to, for it to fold too. We're
Well,
not going to let that happen.
let's hope that don't happen. But
No, that's not going to happen.
that's not going to happen. So I get you count days when you're in races. So how many days are left till the May primary?
A lot of people count days. I don't. I just run hard. I run like it's up to me and pray like it's up to God. And when it gets here, it gets here. But
Yeah,
we're May 16th is the day, and we're it's fast approaching. I was the first major candidate to announce back in July of 2021. So it's been a long, enduring race for me, but I have so much enjoyed traveling the state and visiting with people and hearing their concerns, and hearing their focuses and hearing, what they would like to see the state accomplish. Because, so many times we talk about our goals, but really we need to find out what is the goals of the people of Kentucky as a whole, and
Yeah,
try to do our best to help accomplish that.
that's it. And the thing about it is, I think we get caught up in that sometimes. I've ran for office, and you
Sure.
obviously have too, and you get caught up in it's I. It's
Right.
I think, fill in the blank, and I
Yeah.
guess we need to listen more, right?
Yeah.
It's what do the people,
That's why
uh,
God gave us 2 ears and one mouth to
in
listen
one
to
mouth, two
speak.
eyes, two ears,
Yes.
listen and see more and talk
Yeah.
less, I guess. Uh,
Exactly.
clear one thing up,
Sure.
and there's not been much discussion about this overall, is you don't have a running mate right now, and I don't think any of the other candidates, I think,
The
officially have
only
running mates. So
the only one.
what has changed in that over the last election?
Sure. The only running mate that has been announced, I don't know that they can officially put him on the form, but the only one is Kelly Craft did announce Max Wise as her running mate. But no, I don't have a running mate. About 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, they passed legislation that allowed you to run as governor without lieutenant governor until after the primary. Now you can choose beforehand,
Yeah,
but you don't have to determine until after the primary. And that is good in so many ways. A lot of people don't realize that think Ernie Fletcher might have been the only one that ran under this scenario, but it used to be for a brief period of time, they had what they called public financing of the gubernatorial races, which us on the Republican side basically called it, candidate welfare, as it were. But
yeah,
so when we as a body repealed the public financing of the gubernatorial races, we accidentally repealed the gubernatorial exploratory committee. People may have forgotten, but when Ernie first started running, he did not have a lieutenant governor because he was operating. Now he did by the time that he filed to actually officially filed. But once we repealed that gubernatorial exploratory committee, you basically had to have a declared lieutenant governor before you raised one dime or expended one dime. And if you wanted, for somebody like myself who really, just because I'm not a prolific fundraiser, wanted to start early, it would be difficult because if you pick a lieutenant governor, a year and a half or 2 years early and something happens and they leave or they choose they don't want to do it, well, then it causes all sorts of problems when it comes to doing the finance. So this is really a good path. It mirrors to a certain degree the presidential, where you run as your own on presidential and you pick your vice president after the primary. So in many ways, that's good. It doesn't require, but it affords, the opportunity if we have, hopefully we don't have a contentious primary, but if you have a contentious primary, it allows you as the winner to potentially pick, the second or third person on there to try to unify the party in some degree. Because, and to be honest with you, Roger, we've got to unify at the end of this. I tell everybody, iron sharpens iron, but a house divided, well, it just can't stand. The good book tells us
no,
it can't stand. And
that's right,
so,
and it's kind of like the presidential
yeah,
uh, model, right? The president, they
yeah,
go to the convention, they pick their running mate
yeah,
after the primaries are over.
yeah,
Reagan did it with Bush in '80 to
yeah.
unify the party, right? That was the
And we
big,
have to.
and you may have to. Hopefully, it doesn't get that bad. Let's hope it's all stays polite, but you know how things go. You never
Well,
know what's
even if it stays polite, which I hope it does, and I think it will, but even if it stays polite, we still got to go in 100% unified in the fall, because this year we've got one goal, and that goal is to make Andy Bashir one-term governor. And to be honest with you, if we are not 100% unified, he's going to have a second term. Now, if we go in
hope.
100% unified, we can beat him. I mean, all you got to do is bring up the fact that so many people lost their businesses. So many kids are behind on education because he shut down the schools. So many people never got their unemployment when they were promised about it. You know, people were told they couldn't go to church and worship their Lord and Savior in the ways that they wanted to. So when people are reminded that, but if we go in fractured, you know, sadly, he will probably get a second term.
Yeah. Incumbency is very strong. You've experienced it. You've experienced it
It
as a
is.
state rep and as auditor. Being the incumbent
Yes.
gives you a certain advantage.
It does. And we also seen the fact of when you're not in unison. I mean, look what happened to Bevan in 2019. We were not in unison. And, you know, part of that was on Bevan, you know, some of the things he said and did. But, you know, we were not in unison. And the Liberty Party pulled about 3%. And sadly, they celebrated the fact that Bevan lost. And I tell my Liberty people friends, you know, it's like, well, how do you like the way your liberties were treated under Bashir? You know, how does that working out for you? So we shouldn't have celebrated that, you know, from that standpoint. If you didn't like, there was things you didn't like about him, then Bevan, then that's fine. But don't celebrate the fact that he was beat, especially if your main goal is liberty and freedoms, because Bashir is definitely not about liberties and freedoms. So if your main goal is about liberties and freedoms, you know, hopefully you'll think about me. But if you don't vote for me and somebody else wins, please let's all come together and make sure the Republican wins, because any of the Republicans in this race are going to be more about your liberty and your freedoms than the one on the Democrat side.
That's it. Well, Mike, it's been a great conversation with you today. I guess some housekeeping. Your website,
Website is
MikeHarmon.com.
MikeHarmon.com. It's real easy. Would love for people to go there, and I would encourage you, you know, check it out. And if you think that I'm the candidate that you want to support, if you will consider, if you're not able, that's okay. But if you consider just donate $1, just $1 to say, hey, Mike, I'm supporting you. I'm going to give you this $1, and this is just an acknowledgement that I'm going to be voting for you.
That's it. And you're on social media. We've got Instagram, Mike Harmon KY, Mike Harmon, Kentucky. We got you on Facebook.
Yes.
Any other?
Mike Harmon for governor.
Yeah.
Facebook, you can just Google, Mike Harmon for governor, Mike Harmon KY on both Twitter and Instagram. And that's primary sources to keep up with me. Certainly, if you want to email me, Mike at MikeHarmon.com, would welcome any input.
Thank you. Theme song needs to be Traveling Man by Ricky Nelson, because I follow you on Facebook and so forth, and you cover more ground quickly than about anybody I know. You're up here in the morning and over there in the evening, and it's all parts in between. You cover a lot. This is a big state. People don't realize how big Kentucky is.
It is a big state. It is a big state.
It takes I can be in DC from Pikeville sooner than I can be in Mayfield.
Yeah.
If the traffic's not bad, if I time it just right. It takes me 8 hours, about 8 hours, I guess, to get to DC. It takes me almost a little more than 8.5, 9 hours to get all the way to the other end of the state. So this is a big state.
Thankfully, I'm centrally, well, it's not exactly centrally, but, you know, it's close to Lexington. So it's kind of centrally in the middle of the state. So usually I can get to most places with 4.5 hours each way. Now, if I was coming from end to end, then yes, that is.
Yeah. If you go from here, from Pikeville to Paducah, as they say, that's a long haul. Haul.
And there's not a straight line. There's not a straight line.
No, there's no straight line. We need to get straight lines into Eastern Kentucky and get a couple of these highways completely 4-lane. Maybe we can do that as our next governor.
There you go. We've got to work on that.
Get that Hal Rogers Parkway 4-lane all the way to Hazard.
There you go. Well, and infrastructure is important. People are not going to develop where there's not infrastructure.
That's right. That's a key to it. So, all right, Mike, it was good seeing you, and best of luck out there.
Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you.